Hey everyone, I'm thrilled to welcome back our good friend Leslie Nicole from French Kiss Collections. What are you going to be sharing with us today? It's something a little bit different from your past sessions.
Yeah, today's going to be a little more technical, but I've tried to keep it pretty simple too, because I didn't want you guys to have your eyes glaze over and with a lot of technical stuff. So we're going to be talking about image resolution, understanding DPI versus PPI for the things, and then we're going to talk about some of the main color spaces, color modes.
Incredible. So some really useful fundamentals and actually stuff that you don't need to be a complete beginner to get a little bit wrong sometimes or not leverage to their fullest extent. So I think it's a real good refresher, even if you're perhaps more of an intermediate level creative. It's definitely good to kind of be cognizant to how to use these things.
I think so. Like, I know that a lot of you are going to know some of this stuff, but there's some misconceptions I see happen a lot. So I just wanted to cover them. And I know that probably some of you might be, fairly new to digital imaging. So hopefully there'll be some things in here that you can take away that would be helpful.
Amazing. Well, without further ado, I believe you've prepared a presentation for all the design cutters out there.
Yes. Let me go ahead and share screen.
Quick and dirty intro.
Yeah, we're basically really covering the basics here. All right. Okay, so first off, let's just get right into what's the difference between DPI and PPI. And DPI refers to dots per inch, and that is basically a term for printers. It's how many dots are going down per inch in a printer. And PPI refers to pixels per inch, and that refers to digital images and displays. So your digital image is going to be measured in PPI. Your monitor is measured in PPI. Even like your iPhone, your iPad, those would be in PPI measurements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely good vital terms to get down. I don't know if you had this over in France, but super confusing. We get all these radio ads for PPI. It's like payment protection insurance. Like a whole series of scams around that. And it's only as a designer, I'm like, that's not what that term means. That's pixels per inch.
And over the years, these have been used so interchangeably. Like when people say DPI, we know they mean PPI. And I've even been guilty of putting down DPI because even though I know the difference, I know that other people are looking for that. They want to see 300 DPI. So sometimes I'll do 300 DPI in parentheses PPI. It's like, yeah, I know it's called PPI, but a lot of people don't. So, okay. So image resolutions. Images for print need to be higher than resolutions for web. I'm sure most of you know that 300 PPI is recommended for printing and 72 PPI is for webs and devices. But I'm going to do something real quick. Right before we get going further, I'm going to give you guys a little quiz. We're going to do a little quiz, and I want you to tell me which image is high resolution. Is it image A on the left, which is 3,456 by 5,184 pixels at 72 PPI? Or is it image B on the right, which is 800 by 1,200 pixels at 300 PPI? So this is a little bit of a trick question because there's kind of you could kind of answer this both ways. So technically, it's true that the resolution output on image B is 300 PPI. So you could say it's high resolution in a way. But what do we actually mean when we say high resolution? So the thing is, when you see the high resolution, what you really mean is you want an image that's high quality, that's large enough for your needs. And so what we really mean is we want an image that is high in PPI, in pixel dimensions. And let me show you what I mean by that. Let me go back up here. Now this image on the left, image A, if you look at the pixel dimensions, that's really high. It's 3,456 by 5,184. This, if I change the DPI to 300 without changing the conversion, just changing the resolution output, that'll give me a 17.25 inch high print. This one on the right is set to 300 PPI, but this will only give me a 4-inch high print. So I see this a lot of people thinking that 300 DPI is like, you know, that's the crucial thing. And it's not. It's your whole pixel dimension that's crucial. The pixel output is just an output setting. And let's go over to Photoshop real quick and have a look at that. So here's this image that I said is at 72 PPI. It's due to 100%, and it's quite big. And if I open up my image dialog box, it's set to 72 pixels per inch. But this resolution thing here is really just an output settings, letting you know what's possible with an image of these pixel dimensions. So if I don't hit resample, if I just leave it off and change that to 300, my pixel dimension stays the same, but now it's showing me that I can print this out at 7.28 inches high. So I really want people to get to know that it's the pixel dimensions that are important. Whereas this other little image that was image B at 300 PPI, if I open that up, that's only going to print out at 4 inches high. And I think, you know, if I gave you guys a texture collection that I said was high resolution, and indeed it was 300 PPI, but it's only 4 inches high, you wouldn't be very happy, I don't think. So yeah, I really want to just get the point across that that pixel dimension is just an output setting. It's not really the true image size.
Mm-hmm. And when you say output setting, you know, that could be for printers, you're saying?
Yeah, it could be for printers. We're going to get that. I'm going to circle back to that soon of why 300 PPI.
And it's great to dig into this stuff. And you're totally right in that I think there's a lot of ambiguity in this area.
Yeah.
People kind of gloss over it. And like you say, it's DPI, it's PPI. People never really seem to be able to clearly define these things and why they are the way they are.
Yeah, and I'd kind of go in this to later slides, but 300 PPI on its own doesn't mean anything. It only means something when you pair it with a size. You know, if you want an 8x10 at 300 PPI, that suddenly means something. Mm-hmm. Just on its own, it's just an output setting. It's not a size.
Yes.
Let's see here.
So you were saying the answer was A in that case?
The answer was A, in my opinion, because I think that high resolution really means something that's an image that has sufficient pixel dimensions for the intended output. And in the case, we meant an image that is large in pixel dimensions. And the PPI is only an output setting. Okay, so here's another little test now that I've gone through that with you guys. Which of these images is the higher quality? Which is a high quality image? Image A, which is 3000 by 3000 pixels at 72 PPI, or image B at 3000 by 3000 pixels at 300 PPI, or C, both. Because it's the same exact size image. It's just one, the output is set to 300, and the other, the output is set to 3000. 72 rather. And let's do a little test real quick. I'm going to go back to Photoshop real quick. And let's just take this one. And I think that's set to 72. Yes. This one is set to 72 pixels per inch. I'm going to duplicate that. Image, duplicate. And now I'm going to set that to 300 without checking the resample box. I don't want to resize it. I'm just changing the output. And now if I were to drag this over here and drop it in there, there's no size difference. See? It's just the same. I don't know if you can see that. I'm toggling off the layer. Whereas if I drug in this little image in here, that was smaller pixel size, even though this one is at 300 PPI, it's really tiny.
Yeah.
So Photoshop doesn't care if it's set to 300 or 72. It's the pixel dimensions that count.
But B can be printed much larger than A can.
No, it can't. On this one?
Yeah.
No, it can be printed exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
This one, you want to change the output setting to 300, but it's still the same size possible as B.
And why do you want to change the output setting for print?
It's really more convenience than anything else. It's really, that output setting is not like, it's really that output setting is really just to show you what's possible. At 300 PPI, I can print out an image at 17.28. If I change this to 350, I can print out an image at 14.8 inches. If I change it to 240, I can print this out at 2.16. And I'm going to go into this further of what you need as a bare minimum for printing. Because actually, 300 PPI is a rule of thumb for printing. It's not set in stone. Does that make more sense to you guys?
With the two examples you gave, the 72 PPI wouldn't be suitable for print, I'm guessing.
It's not that it wouldn't be suitable for print. It has a sufficient pixels. It has the same exact amount of pixels as the one on the right. So it can print the same quality, the same size as the one on the right. It's just that the output setting is different. And to tell you the truth, the output setting doesn't really matter all that much. I mean, when you're putting it on your paper, hold on a second. Let me just do something real quick. Let me add a page here. And we're going to just bring in, I'm in InDesign right now, by the way. Mm-hmm. Let me just, so this would be a document I might print from. So if I bring in an image, I think I have that one. Do I have that one there? Yes, I do. So this is set, I think it's actually set at, I think it is set at 300. Okay, so we're going to do that. And then I'm going to draw another box, and I'm going to go and open up that image. Let's see, where is it? I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to reset this to set. And actually, that was set at 240. I'm going to set this to 72 without changing without resampling. And I'm going to save this as 72. Go back to InDesign. And get that one at 72. And it does come in bigger. And I know this is going to confuse you guys, but if I just fit it to the frame, it's actually the same. You can't really see it in InDesign, but these will print out exactly the same. Even though I had this set at 72 and this one set at 240, I think it's set at. If I were to print this page right now, they would look exactly the same. They would come out of my printer exactly the same.
So I guess the question is, why bother with resolution at all? Why not just do it based on dimensions?
Well, dimensions are the important information, but the output setting does matter in that. I mean, it doesn't matter totally, but it's more convenient to already have it set up as 300 PPI. Mm-hmm. But the quality and the size has not changed. I can print either of these files from my printer, and they will look identical.
Mm-hmm. So the takeaway lesson here at this point is really, especially with printing, make sure you have actually a good sized image. Like before you even get into the resolution, you can't really work with a tiny image.
Right. So the takeaway really is that pay attention to pixel dimensions more than your output setting when you're looking for sizing. That 300 PPI really only makes sense if it's also paired with the size and outcome size. Let's say if I say 300 PPI, it doesn't really mean much. But if I say I want an 8x10 at 300 PPI, then that suddenly means something.
The final print dimensions and pixel dimensions are all that count.
Right. Yes. If I'm understanding you right, yes. The pixel dimension, what really counts, let's go back to Photoshop for a second, is can you make the print size you want with the pixels that you have? And you just check your image size dialog box here. And let's say I needed to print this out at 300 pixels per inch. Oops, 300. And with this image, I can print it out at 8.213 inches. So the resolution is just telling me what size I can print out with these pixel dimensions. What can I do at 300 pixels per inch?
And then if you were to try and resize larger beyond that, that's where quality loss would occur.
Right.
So actually the resolution is impacting the size, so to speak, or the printable size.
It's not impacting it. It's more like this is showing you what's possible. The image itself, the pixel dimensions haven't changed. The image size hasn't changed. The quality hasn't changed. This is just telling you at 300 PPI output, you can get this size print.
Cool.
Okay, let me see where I was in my slides here. Actually, I need to hold on a second. Let me go back to where I was, which was here. Okay, so I'm going to get down to now why 300 PPI. Where does this come from? Where's this number come from? This comes back to printing on offset printing with halftones. And everyone knows what that is, offset printing. That's where how you print magazines. It's large volume printing, using halftones, newspapers, color documents, magazines. All this is done by offset printing. And in offset printing, use halftones that are measured in LPI, or lines per inch. And normally with newspapers, you print out at 80 to 100 LPI, lines per inch. Color documents, consumer magazines, catalogs and stuff are from 133 to 150. Fine art books and magazines are 175 to 250. But that's kind of, you don't get up there very often. That's like really fine art books. So the actual rule of thumb is not just 300 PPI, boom. The real rule of thumb is it's 1.5 to 2 times the LPI. So for instance, if you're printing that 150 LPI, which would be like a magazine or whatever, the minimum you would need was 225 PPI per image. But 300 PPI means you have wiggle room. And I'm going to put this into context a little bit of why you need that wiggle room. I've been in digital imaging like 28 years, and I did print design and production, back in the very beginning of digital. And back then, scanners were really expensive. And even if you had a really good scanner that might cost thousands of dollars, it wasn't that great. And also, digital photography was just starting. I mean, a few of the top photographers were just starting to play with it, and it was like really expensive. But most people, if they needed a digital file, they would have to go to a service bureau and get a drum scan. So you made sure it was going to be big enough. Let's say that you needed to send an image to a magazine, and they were going to print it 5x7 on a spread. Well, so you sent in a 5x7 at the 225 PPI image, which would be the minimum for 150 LPI printing. Well, let's say the art director gets into the spread and they decide, I'd really like to zoom this picture in more, or I want to change my layout a little bit and make this image bigger. Well, then you're kind of, you have no wiggle room to do that. So 300 PPI is a nice, gives you plenty of wiggle room for most instances in offset printing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think it can understandably be quite daunting. I'm really glad you're talking us through this today, because I don't come from a print background. So actually, I have a pretty weak understanding of print techniques and really everything you're sharing. This is, it's really interesting insight.
Well, it can get really complex. I spent about 14 years working in print design and production. And I think it's kind of good that I started way back then, because I can see now why some of these things came into being. And someone coming in just now, they just hear 300 PPI, but they don't really know what that means. Why?
Yeah.
300 PPI. What does that really mean? Okay.
Yeah, really interesting.
Now, for printing with inkjet, you actually have a lot more wiggle room, because really printing to inkjet printers, you don't really need 300 PPI. It won't hurt, but 240 PPI is actually sufficient. I saw a webinar through Kelby training. You guys know that Kelby training?
Kelby One, yeah.
Yeah, Kelby One training. And he was with an Epson rep, and he said 240 PPI is perfectly fine. You really only get in the danger zone at 180, about 180 and below.
Mm-hmm.
And this is good to know, because what if you're printing something out at home on your own inkjet printer and you'd like to print a larger size, and you think, oh, but I can't, it's 300 PPI, I can't do anything else. You got some wiggle room there. So I'm just trying to really let people know that that 300 PPI is not the holy grail of PPI. It's just a number that is ample for printing, giving you some leeway too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good to know. I think escaping these blanket rules gives people a little more confidence and control. And that's really important, because we talk all the time about designing for the context. And often this might be, are you designing for a billboard or something, very small that someone's going to see in a fleeting moment? But equally, the same mindset should apply to print, right? You should be aware of the context of where it's going to be printed, instead of just blanket applying a rule.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, are you guys ready to shift over to color now?
Yes, let's do it.
Now, color can get really complex. So I'm just, going to cover some of the basic color profiles and what they are and what they're for. So on the left, we have a graphic here with the color spectrum being kind of the spectrum of visible colors to the eye. And ProPhoto RGB is this big purple triangle, and that shows you the spectrum that ProPhoto RGB will cover. And ProPhoto RGB, like I shoot in ProPhoto RGB on RAW with my digital camera. You could also create a document in Photoshop with like ProPhoto RGB. This is
a really interesting visual that you pulled up. I haven't seen this before, Leslie.
Yeah, it's I kind of recreated this from other ones that I found, because I couldn't find a stock image. I just tried to recreate it myself. But it's a pretty typical one, showing how the gamuts, the coverage of the gamuts.
Mm-hmm. We got a couple of people using it, but quite a few people are not using it. A few people have never heard of it. So
yeah, so when I'm capturing, raw images, I want to capture as wide a spectrum of colors as I possibly can. Even if when my output, I can't use them all, I'd rather have that be there, because there are some printing processes, like actually my Epson printer, my Pro Epson printer, I can print ProPhoto RGB on that. So I like to capture in ProPhoto RGB. There are some people who prefer to capture in Adobe RGB or SRGB just because it works in their workflow better. With that, let's move on to Adobe RGB. It's called Adobe RGB 1998, but still very much in use. And Adobe RGB is this orange triangle. Can you guys see this okay on the video?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's the orange one, and it has a larger spectrum than sRGB, and it's actually closer to the ISO coded color space, which is the offset printing. So, halftones and the offset printing on coated paper, it's closest to that. So people who are professionals in print will often work in RGB, and it's actually a really stable environment for faithful print output.
Mm-hmm.
But there are catches to that. You need an Adobe RGB monitor to really take advantage of that color space. And most of our monitors are sRGB.
Little side tangent here, Leslie, from my earlier career, but when I worked as a web designer, what would often happen is I would output images for web, and there would be a very, very subtle variation in the color output. And so there would be a seam where it was meant to just be seamless. There would be a seam, and often I can't even remember the issue. I think it was something to do with like different monitors or different
Ah.
OSs, where it looked okay for some people, but other people saw the seam, and it was so maddening. And I had to kind of try and learn more about color output at the time, because it was just an issue that tons of people ran into.
I don't think I've ever seen that one. That's interesting. But I worked more in print than web, so maybe I just didn't run across that. Interesting.
So we've got Adobe RGB, and then we've got SRGB.
One more thing about Adobe RGB, it's not recommended for the web. If you save an Adobe RGB file and put it on the web, it's going to look funky. It's going to look really bad. And I don't know if you remember, Tom, there was a few webinars ago, someone asked me why their images saved for web looked so dull.
Yes.
And I told them to check their profiles, the color profile. So it could be that she was saving it in Adobe RGB and not realizing it. When you save to, save for web, you want to make sure you're clicking convert to sRGB.
Can we see this in the drop down super quick in Photoshop?
So let's go back here and let's do, actually this one's already in sRGB. I think they had another one in ProPhoto. Let me see. Maybe I don't. No, I guess I don't. It doesn't matter. So if I do save for web, that comes up here. And this is already in sRGB, but even if it's already in sRGB, you want to click that little thing that says convert to sRGB right in here. I don't know if you guys see that in the video. Yeah. It's above document profile. You want to convert it. You want to keep that checked.
And that means if you don't check that, it's going to look dull on web. Is that what you were saying?
This is already in sRGB, so it'll probably look okay.
Yep.
But if I were to do something, let me show you. That'd be fun. Actually, this was my next slide, I think. So I'm going to do it now. If you need to change your color space for output, you go up here to edit and choose. You have assign profile here and you have convert profile, and you want to use convert to profile. And that way your colors will stay as faithful as possible to your original. So if I do convert to profile right here, and I'm going to change this to, let's change it to Adobe RGB. So it looks pretty much the same, right? Let's do that save for web again. And this should, let's turn off. Well, usually I'll usually see a terrible shift there. Maybe if I actually save, it'll show. Let's try it. Let me see where I put that. Okay, here we go. Ooh, see how ugly that is? This was my original. That was my saved JPEG.
Oh no, it's lost all its vibrancy.
Yeah, because this was I converted this to Adobe RGB, and then when I saved for web, I didn't convert to sRGB.
This might even be the issue I had all those years ago. To be honest, it's been a while, so I can't remember it. But I remember finding a fix, and it just changed my life. So please let us know in the comments. Have you been getting really frustrated, banging your head against the wall, getting faded web images? And did this just give you an aha moment? Because even if it's one person, that makes me super happy, because I remember this kind of thing frustrated me so much until I figured it out.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I should go back to, I'm kind of skipping over my sRGB slide. Let me know if you guys get confused. We're kind of skipping around here a little bit, but if you need to, another thing about, my last slide was going to tell you, one thing to watch out for is if you're copying and pasting between documents or dragging or placing between documents, if they are in different color spaces, you can sometimes see something funky. And I tried to find an example for you guys, and I just couldn't find it. But sometimes, just keep this in your mind, sometimes if you place a texture that's sRGB into like your ProPhoto image you're working on, the colors might go, wow! They might just suddenly go totally wonky on you. And if that ever happens to you, just go back to the texture and do that convert to profile to the profile you're working on, and then drag it in.
Good to know.
Okay, so let's go back to my InDesign real quick. Okay, let's go on to SRGB. And that's this SRGB is a smaller triangle down here. It's the real dark blue triangle. And that's kind of a universal, it is the universal color space for web and devices. So, you know, anything for the web should be SRGB, saving things to that you're going to put on your, that's meant for iPhone, iPad, should be SRGB. But also, there's also some printing that's sRGB. Like a lot of labs will tell, and print on demand, they'll ask you for a 300 PPI sRGB file. And there's some people, like there's a big argument. I see different articles on this. Some people say, like start in Adobe RGB and then convert to sRGB. Some people say do sRGB all the way through from shooting to all the way to print because everything will stay in the same color space. For me, I like starting in either ProPhoto RGB or Adobe RGB. I use Adobe RGB. I scan when my scanner won't scan in ProPhoto RGB, but I can scan in Adobe RGB. So I scan like my textures, I scan all my vintage things in Adobe RGB. And then when I do the collections, I convert to sRGB.
I have a question, Leslie.
Yeah.
In this wonderful diagram, even ProPhoto RGB, which covers the most, does not cover all of it. So with some of that super light kind of tealy color at the top, what is that? Is that not covered in any digital format? And is that just representative of what the eye is seeing or something?
Yeah, it's what the eye can see. So from my, I'm not an expert on all this stuff, you guys. I've done it for a long time, but I'm definitely not a guru on it. But from my understanding, ProPhoto RGB will only cover this part of the visible spectrum, and Adobe RGB will only cover that, and etc.
Okay.
So, I mean, our eyes are incredible instruments that can see amazing colors, and there's just no way to totally capture all of that.
And then interestingly, what we're showing here as capturable by the eye, but not digitally, has actually had to be adapted digitally to fall within. Like, in fact, let's go really meta. What color mode is this diagram image in that we're seeing right now?
Well, I created an sRGB because I knew it was going to be shown on the web.
Cool. So yeah, that's where it's a real kind of mind melter. But actually, every single color we're seeing on the whole spectrum fits within the sRGB triangle, but it's just representative.
Definitely true.
Mind blown at this point.
So then CMYK, of course, is only used in offset printing, and that's when because they have 4 different. Actually, it could be 4 or more, actually, or it could be less. But in CMYK, they're using cyan, to yellow, and black. K is the black. Mm-hmm. Different plates, and then they build those up in dots. If you really look closely at something that's printed below 150 lines per inch, you'll see the halftone dots.
Really good to know.
Pantones are called spot colors because you can, like I said, that's why you could do 4 more. Like someone could do CMYK print, but maybe they want like a really special print, a really special color, like maybe a metallic or a fluorescent, for example, that you can only get by adding a 5th ink. Mm-hmm. So that would be a spot color, or you might just do a two color brochure and you use 2 spot colors. Yeah. And those would be the Pantone colors. Pantone also has books that will translate, what is it called? Spot to process, I think it's called. So it'll give you kind of an approximation of their colors in the CMYK.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's pretty much wraps it up. I think I've covered everything. Yeah, we went over the convert your profile if you're pasting between things. So yeah, let me go ahead and stop sharing.
Yeah, let's show some love for Leslie. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk the design cutters and I through that. But yeah, very, very cool.
Well, I'm really glad that you guys had some good takeaways from this, because I was a little bit nervous. Like, oh God, I'm being too simplistic for this.
No, far from it. No, it was great, and really, really appreciate your time as always, Leslie. We'll chat really soon.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Design Cut. Thanks, all of you guys. Bye-bye.
All right, take care.